Hi, Bill Henshaw here again to talk about probably one of the most seriously contested issues of our time, which is abortion. And with the recent transition of the nine old farts, aka the U.S. Supreme Court, to a seemingly solid conservative composition with the appointments of Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh by the Donald, the hyper, albeit non issue, of abortion is again being heavily debated on both sides, and with an expectation that Roe v. Wade will finally be overturned. While not a fan of Roe myself, a decision known on the court at the time as Harry's abortion, quote unquote, pursuant to its author Harry S. Blackmun, aka Hip Pocket Harry, straying far from his Minnesota twin at the time, Chief Justice Warren E. Berger. With this decision, I do believe the right decision was reached even without any support from any provision of the Constitution for the United States. And this decision was and is a stellar example of what government often functions, in the words of T.S. Eliot, who sagely opined that the last temptation is the greatest treason, to do the right thing for the wrong reason. And I might as well add that epithet to Brown v. Board of Education, a subject matter for another day. He also succinctly summarizes any and all decisions based on the civil rights, quote unquote, supposedly, I mentioned this, by the non-existent 14th War Amendment, including Brown. To be sure, some good might have occurred, but my question with regard to all such civil, quote unquote, rights decisions is this. Are the small gains which resulted from such decisions really worth the overt use of federal, regional, martial law rule jurisdiction and the overt use of the military by the president, most particularly old bubblehead Eisenhower as commander-in-chief of the armed forces, as was done to desegregate the schools in Little Rock, Arkansas, in concert with the destruction of the several states admitted into this union and our federated Republican form of government of defined and limited powers, really worth the cost, especially to our posterity and generations to follow? Returning to Roe, I take a far broader perspective to the matter of bringing children into the world today, while conceding that many of the following situations existed in my parents' generation as well. A major difference from the start is the large percentage today of children whose single parents are compelled to accept social insecurity benefits, most particularly aid to families of dependent children, and all the government BS that comes along with it. Indeed, I am aware of a quasi-family situation in which the mom somehow brought a child into this world with a man, quote unquote, who had fathered 5 other children from different mothers, all of whom very likely relied upon such government, quote-unquote, benefits, about as far from the ideal family situation as can be imagined. Yet parents like these inherently rely upon benefits, quote-unquote, which the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled are not cognizable to any provision of the Constitution, and which themselves rely upon the quote-unquote principle that the same government can, for all apparent intents and purposes, tax producers of wealth, aka taxpayers, out of existence to dole out quote-unquote benefits to consumers, an astounding transfer of wealth and a theft of property which the consumers could not attempt individually, and of which Robin Hood would be envious indeed. Long and short is that producers can, on who knows what provision of the Constitution, be made responsible in large part for acts committed in the bedroom of the consumers, of which they have no knowledge and certainly have not given any consent. Using a quote-unquote principle of this sort, the consumers are giving at least tacit consent to a government not only of unlimited power, but one operated for all apparent intents and purposes by the unfettered discretion of the war powers of the president acting as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And sooner, more likely than later, such consumers will be bitten in the ass themselves but will not have any remedy to keep the government within the Constitution which they knowingly abandoned. Do not think that I oppose the availability of at least limited benefits as currently mismanaged by the federal government. Indeed, on the state level, it might be possible to implement such programs, but the reality of the situation is that local management of such programs is best, but with the far more efficient localized response to the needs of the applicants, and if administered by the government, a lot of savings of quote-unquote taxpayer dollars as well. The topper here is that local officials, assuming benefits described are not allocated to local nonprofit organizations, will be much more responsive to the pulse of local voices, i.e. instructing their representatives that any changes in benefit programs can be made as quickly as the next election. And in the absence of perpetual taxation by the bastards in Washington, D.C., pursuant to what they perceive to be the unfettered discretion of their taxing agents, the producers will retain the majority of their property in the form of their time and labor, currently unrecognized by IRS agents, thus having more earnings, which in turn, in many cases, is likely to mean more donations to voluntary nonprofit organizations offering benefits, and to the extent that any local taxation is involved, have a meaningful and substantive voice in such local elections. The really big deal here is that local government, instituted on these principles, while not a perfect solution, which doesn't exist, at least operates on the philosophy of Aristotle, that man's life and happiness are an end in themselves, not as Plato, Immanuel Kant, and Karl Marx would have you believe, simply a means to any end desired by a government in which nobody has a voice and without regard to any consequences to its victims. With these facts clearly in evidence, I challenge any of my listeners to come up with any plausible reasons why there is not a right to abortion. And as always for me, I practice what I preach, and for a variety of reasons, with abortion and the catastrophic effect of bringing a child into this world has, since I do not have any children, even though I'm the last of my family line, the costs are not worth it to me or to a child. All the more so since children today will be brought into a damaged and a suicidal world in which rapid increases in automation will replace a large amount of jobs for which they might otherwise be quote-unquote qualified. Overcrowding and population increases will be so severe that Congress and or the President will be compelled to enact programs for mandatory sterilization, which will be sure can be cut across at least racial and monetary lines, and this will be done on national security grounds, which no court or judge would even consider reversing if 225 years of American history is any guide. Please remember to like my videos, subscribe, and tell your friends. Thank you.